In this video, I'm covering chapters 8 and 9 together because they're closely related. In these chapters, Father Dubé tells us that we need to be credible witnesses of the gospel, and we can't do that if we don't look like pilgrims on the way to heaven. We won't do it if, to make a sort of pun, we don't put our money where our mouth is. And voluntary poverty is a big part of that. Why isn't the world converted yet? It's because we're not seen as men and women on fire for the Lord. Words are just not enough. They won't convince anyone. As St. Paul said, the kingdom of God depends not on talk, but on power. Or, as Father Dubé says in a very catchy fashion, there is more influence with less affluence. And this is a problem with a lot of Catholic institutions today. Initially, they all feel the need to make money to sustain the mission, and eventually, the making money part prevails over whatever else they were supposed to be doing. At the same time, of course, the preachers of the gospel are supposed to be cared for, but there's a connection here. The preachers of the gospel are supposed to be poor and in need of alms, and then they're supposed to receive those alms. And St. Dominic is a good example of this. When he went out to preach, he realized that without his order living poverty, they wouldn't be taken seriously. At his time, a common slur against the church was the wealthy lifestyle that so many Catholic leaders lived, and he and his order adopted voluntary poverty to counteract that. In part, this witness is because those living voluntary poverty have a pilgrim witness. If we say we're on our road to the promised land, then we should look like it. And pilgrims don't amass a lot of wealth for themselves. They don't seek permanence and security in the here and now because they're on their way to somewhere else. And, if you have to carry everything you have on the road, then suddenly possessions seem rather different. Now, that doesn't mean that all kinds of security are bad. We're supposed to replace the individual kind of security that comes from amassing a lot of wealth with a communal sort of security, because pilgrims also are supposed to be generous and open-handed to their fellow pilgrims on the road. So as we travel along, we're not traveling as an individual pilgrim, we're traveling as a pilgrim church on the road together, and that provides all the security we need along the way. But we're all going to die poor. At the end of our pilgrimage, we all have nothing. And Father Dubé also makes a very interesting point about that we need this conversion of heart, we need this pilgrim witness if we want a more just society. He said that if we are going to change the operational structures of a society, the monetary systems, the taxes, welfare, trade agreements, government regulations, all those structures, what needs to change first are the ideological structures that support these operational structures. He quotes from Richard McCormick. It can be argued that the single dominating and organizing value in American culture is economic, the good life, and ideological structure. Our American culture promotes and rewards this and thereby educates to it. Even our universities have capitulated to this value. Too often, they simply train for the job market. Practically, then, this means that other values will be pursued and promoted only within this overriding priority. Thus, justice in education, housing, medical services, job opportunity is promoted within the dominance of the financial criteria, if we can afford it, where afford refers to the retention of a high level of consumership. The dominance of the economic value is the root of the enslavement, the ideological structure. And Father Dubé expands on this by talking about what this affording it tends to look like. He said, let's imagine a devout Catholic couple, and they go to church and they hear a sermon about the need to give to the missions. And on their way home, they decide that, they could afford to give $25 extra beyond their usual contribution to this missionary appeal. And he said most would consider these people to be generous. But he said, what afford means to them is what they can afford to do without giving up their sports cars, their fashionable clothing, their expensive meals, and all the rest of their affluent lifestyle. We can afford what matters to us. But if that ideological structure does not change, true generosity in the operational structures of our society won't grow up. And finally, pilgrim witness comes down to being too interested in the things of the Lord to be interested in becoming wealthy in the here and now. For instance, poets and artists with a great vision in mind often ignore mundane things, sometimes excessively, but we, with such a vision that God has given us before us, should certainly be able to imitate their single minded focus on what matters. We're supposed to look to the Lord and be radiant with joy, but we can't look to the Lord if we are constantly looking at our possessions.